so cool. If someone hands you a guitar at a party, if you play something like that, it's that familiar sound of the blues, but it's also badass because of the way he's playing it, the inflections and the nuance that he's putting in there. Hey there, so today we're talking about rhythm and lead and how to play back and forth between them both, which is a huge part of playing. And this comes from a question from Steve, wanting just to dive into that. So this is one of the best ways you can improve on the guitar, is being able to jump back and forth between rhythm and lead. And there's basically two things you need. One is like a really solid groove that you can access at any point, something that's really burned into your muscle memory. And then the second thing is kind of a library of licks and styles. And it doesn't need to be a huge library, it just needs to be 3 or 4 licks that you can play inside out, back to front, upside down, all that kind of stuff. But a good place to start is by starting with one of the standards, one of the songs that's a great song to jam on. And an example of this that I think is really great is Hideaway by Freddy, because this is a great song for jamming and going back and forth between lead and rhythm. It's a killer song. It's got that Texas blues sound. Okay, so let's take a listen. All right, so here's Freddy King. He's awesome. So it's great melody. How he's playing with a little thumb finger pick there. So, all right, so it's a classic tune, right? Great one to learn. Here's the basic melody. I'll show it for you real quick. So if you look on the screen there, it's basically just in the key of E. It's like a kind of a 12-bar format, and he's just playing this cool little melody. It's a major melody. Freddie King would do a lot of jumping between the major and the minor pentatonic, which then went on to influence people like Stevie Ray Vaughan and everyone really. But so that's the basic melody there. There's variations on there. So basically you're just kind of hammering on to the 2nd fret and then sliding up and doing those pull-offs. But one of the best lessons I've ever seen on this comes from Stevie Ray Vaughan himself. And let's take a look at this little lesson that he gives and break it down, because it's amazing how he shows basically how to kind of get that groove under your fingers and then be able to kind of apply different styles to it and then bring your own signature style to the song. So let's take a look at Stevie himself doing this, which is incredible. I just love watching this.
For instance, okay,
right,
Freddie King does Hideaway like.
Oh, let's change guitars. So it's so cool. If someone hands you a guitar at a party and asks you what to play, if you play something like that, it just is amazing because it's that familiar sound of the blues, but it's also badass because of the way he's playing it, the inflections and the nuance that he's putting in there. Like, for example, instead of just doing that hammer on, he's doing this like slide where it just creates this really big sound. The way he's doing that is he does this kind of half slide. So instead of sliding from the 1st fret to the 2nd fret, he's kind of hitting the fret and then sliding into the note. So it's... So rather than it being... It creates this kind of just this slippery kind of sound. When you hear him playing that, it's such a bad, mean rhythm because he's doing this. He's playing the basic boogie beat, but he's damping it, and he's playing it with a really hard swing. Right? He's playing it with a heavy shuffle where he's accenting the upbeats. So it's kind of like it's that thing, but he's playing it with all downstrokes. I'll slow it down a little bit. So basically, it's going back and forth between rhythm and lead. And one of the best ways you can start with this is just by learning that song, right? So it starts with this little hammer on, and then you jump into the rhythm part. And then you're going to start, a lot of times when he comes into the little lead section, jumping back and forth between rhythm and lead, he'll start with an upstroke. So you'll go. So that upstroke, so it's 1, 2, 3, like that. And that's a good way to jump back into the lead, right? So 1, 2, 3. All right. So that's a good way to get into there. It's just the transition in. And then he plays this really cool little trill. So he's just walking down the scale. And then instead of going back to the basic boogie, he does a rolling boogie like that, where you're walking up. And then these little subtleties and these nuances are really what makes it cool. If you watch here, actually, let me slow it down for you a little bit. Now see how he accents that note? What he does is after he does the rolling boogie, he snaps it with his finger like that to get that note to jump out. So, and then he plays that little, so that riff right there where you go from basically it's going from an A back to an E, and that's an integral part of the blues, is that idea of jumping back and forth between the 1 and the 4 chord. And essentially most of the time it's based around beat 4, so you're going 1, 2, 3. That's the idea, right? There's millions of licks based around that idea of that little movement.